Hello, miladies of inestimable value. You think you're hard to read? Until you meet the one woman who's already reading your footnotes. There's a reason why Sigma females make people nervous. Not loud, not dramatic, but somehow they walk into a room and everyone's internal Wi-Fi starts glitching. Why? Because she's scanning you like a lie detector wrapped in lipstick and silence. And the worst part? You won't even know she's doing it until she makes a comment so precise, so surgical that you feel emotionally undressed. Here's a wild fact. Studies show humans can subconsciously pick up over 27 micro-expressions in less than a second. Sigma females? They do it consciously, and then they file it, like a mental FBI. She won't call you out, she won't expose you. Oh no, she'll just sip her coffee and silently collect data for your emotional autopsy. And what exactly does she notice about people that most of us miss? It's not what you're wearing. It's what your energy is whispering behind your words. It's not who you say you are. It's the part of you you're hiding. So buckle up, because what we're about to uncover isn't just revealing, it's uncomfortable. Not for her, for everyone else. Let's dive into 12 brutally accurate things Sigma females secretly notice about everyone, even the ones who think they've got nothing to hide. Number 1. They notice the ones who try to read them. Most people walk around thinking they're unreadable, that their expressions are locked down, their body language neutral, their emotions tucked safely behind casual words. But Sigma females, they notice the one thing most people overlook, who's secretly trying to read them. See, the Sigma woman has lived most of her life being observed, analyzed, misjudged, and misunderstood. People don't approach her directly, they study her from a distance, ask others about her, test her subtly. But what they don't realize is that the whole time they're trying to figure her out, she already knows what they're doing. She spots the second someone shifts from being curious to calculated. You know that feeling when someone pays just a little too much attention to what you're saying? When they mirror your tone, ask questions with a slight delay, or react in a way that feels a bit too rehearsed. Yeah, she clocks it. She notices who's collecting information on her, not because they care, but because they want leverage, want access, want a way in. And she doesn't say a word. She lets them think they're in control, all while observing their moves like a chess master. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. And Sigma females are experts at it. They've had to be, because the world keeps trying to study them like puzzles that need solving. So over time, they've learned to spot the quiet hunters. The ones who laugh a little too quickly, agree a little too easily, ask just enough questions to seem friendly, but not enough to seem real. She notices who's trying to get a peek behind her mask, not to understand her, but to find a weak point. But the real twist, Sigma females don't get angry when someone tries to read them, they just lose interest. Because once she senses your curiosity isn't genuine, she mentally shuts the door. No confrontation, no warning. Just cold distance. People think they're being subtle. They think they're studying her. What they don't realize is they're already part of her private case study. And once she's figured you out, she never looks twice. Number 2. They notice the fragile ones who hide behind toughness. They notice the fragile ones who hide behind toughness. Not because they're judging, because they've seen it too many times to be fooled. Sigma females have developed a kind of emotional X-ray vision. They can spot the guy who walks into the room talking over everyone, trying to own the space, puffed up with ego. Or the woman who mocks vulnerability and acts like nothing touches her. To most people, they seem confident. To a Sigma, they look exhausted from holding up the act. It's not that they hate toughness. Sigma females respect real strength. But what they can't ignore is when that toughness is just armor. When someone is loud because silence would force them to face themselves. When someone dominates others just to avoid being dominated. She notices the fear behind the volume, the insecurity under the sarcasm, the need for control that screams, "I've been hurt before and I'll hurt first to stay safe." She doesn't need to hear someone's life story to figure this out. It's in the way they interrupt, the way they correct others unnecessarily, the way they brag like their worth is on trial. That kind of energy doesn't impress her. It worries her. Because she knows that kind of person cracks the fastest when life gets real. They don't bend, they snap. Sigma females see right through these performances, not because they're cold, but because they've had to be strong in ways that didn't involve pretending. Their strength was built in silence, in solitude, in showing up for themselves when no one else did. So when someone is posturing, flexing, dominating the conversation, or acting like they're bulletproof, she doesn't envy it. She sees the emotional duct tape barely holding them together. And the truth is, she won't call it out. She won't humiliate or expose. She'll simply keep her distance. Because she knows fragile people with big egos are the most dangerous kind. Not because they're strong, but because they're constantly afraid of being exposed. And that fear makes them unpredictable. Sigma females see the bluff, and they never bet against their intuition. Number 3. They know who's spiritually bankrupt, even if they're religious. They know who's spiritually bankrupt, even if they wear religion like a badge. Sigma females aren't fooled by scripture-quoting, perfectly recited prayers or people who name-drop God in every conversation. They don't look for labels, they look for alignment. Anyone can say they're Christian, Muslim, or deeply spiritual. But she's watching something else entirely, how you live when no one's clapping. To her, real spirituality isn't about performance, it's about presence. It's about integrity when nobody's watching, empathy when there's nothing to gain, and inner peace that doesn't need constant external validation. But many people hide behind religious routines like a moral disguise. They show up to every service, quote every verse, post every blessed and highly favored status, but treat people like garbage behind closed doors, and that's where the Sigma female draws the line. She notices the subtle arrogance of those who think faith makes them superior. She notices when someone preaches patience but gossips viciously. She notices when people speak of love but weaponize religion to judge, exclude, or manipulate. She sees through the facade, the carefully curated holy image, and clocks the emptiness behind it. It's not about being perfect. Sigma females don't expect that. But she can tell when someone uses religion as a shield to avoid doing the real inner work. The ones who talk about forgiveness but hold grudges like trophies. The ones who claim to be spiritual but can't sit in silence without unraveling. To her, that's not faith. It's performance art. And she doesn't confront them. She doesn't argue theology or play moral referee. She simply steps back. Because she knows that people who are spiritually bankrupt are often the quickest to project, condemn, and control. They haven't found inner peace. They've just memorized rituals, and that kind of hollowness is loud. Loud in defensiveness, loud in judgment, loud in insecurity masked as holiness. Sigma females can tell who actually walks with something greater and who's just dressing the part, not by what they say, but by how they move through the world, by how they treat others, by how they respond to discomfort, power, and pain. And when she sees that someone's soul is on mute while their mouth is full of scripture, she listens to the silence, and it tells her everything. Number 4. They detect the inner child that never felt safe. They detect the inner child that never felt safe, and they see it faster than anyone else. Sigma females don't get distracted by surface-level behavior. They look deeper. So when someone's obsessively controlling every detail, needing everything to be perfect, or dominating every conversation with forceful energy, she doesn't see a confident adult. She sees a scared child who never felt protected. She notices the fear behind the perfectionism, the desperate attempt to control the outside world because the inside feels chaotic. She sees how someone's need to get it right every time is really a fear of being criticized, abandoned, or unloved. And when someone speaks over everyone, always trying to prove a point or be the smartest in the room, she doesn't hear confidence. She hears, "I never felt heard growing up." It's in the way people flinch at feedback. It's in the tension they carry in their body. It's in the way they over-explain themselves or seek approval without realizing it. These are things most people miss, but a Sigma female notices them instantly. Not because she's trying to psychoanalyze, but because she's had to decode people to survive. She learned early that what people show on the surface rarely matches what they carry inside. And the sad part? Most of the people she notices don't even know they're doing it. They've built their entire adult identity on top of that wounded child. They call it being ambitious, being strong, or just having high standards. But she sees the deeper truth. They're still trying to feel safe. still trying to earn love they should have received unconditionally, still trying to create control in a world that once felt wildly unsafe. Sigma females don't always say anything. They won't point it out or ask deep questions unless the space feels safe and real, but they see it. And that changes everything. It changes how she responds, how she sets boundaries, how much emotional labor she's willing to invest. Because once she sees that someone's adult behavior is just a defense mechanism for a wounded inner child, they no longer intimidate her. They no longer confuse her. She simply understands that tough exterior is just armor, and it's heavy. Number 5. They notice who's listening just to speak next. They notice who's listening just to speak next. Sigma females have a built-in radar for shallow conversations. The moment someone starts nodding too fast, giving generic responses like "wow" or "that's crazy," or clearly waiting for their turn to hijack the discussion, she mentally files them under surface dweller. She can spot when someone isn't really absorbing what she's saying. They're just using the pause in her voice as their cue to jump in. It's not just about manners. It's about energy. Real listening feels different. There's a presence to it, a stillness, a curiosity, and when it's missing, she senses it instantly. The glazed eyes, the wandering attention, the tension in someone's face like they're holding their sentence hostage until you finally stop talking. She sees it all and quietly disconnects. She's not impressed by people who dominate conversations with long-winded monologues or rush to share a more dramatic version of her story. To her, that screams insecurity, because when someone can't let others speak without centering themselves again, it shows they're not in the room to connect. They're in the room to be seen. Sigma females value depth. They don't talk just to fill space. They speak to understand, to explore, to actually feel something. So when someone treats conversation like a performance, she checks out. Not rudely, not obviously, but she starts offering shorter responses, avoids follow-up questions, and lets the connection die quietly. The irony? The people who interrupt, overtalk, and compete in conversation usually think they're making a great impression. They walk away thinking, "that went well," while she's already decided, "that's the last real thing I'll ever share with them." And no, she won't call you out for it. She won't correct your behavior or demand better. She'll just drift into silence and never open that part of herself to you again. Because to a Sigma female, if you're not listening to understand, you're not someone worth understanding either. Number 6. They detect the ones who modify themselves for every room. They detect the ones who modify themselves for every room. Sigma females spot the shapeshifters right away. The people who act bold in one group and shrink in another, who talk tough around one crowd and suddenly soften their tone around someone with status. At first glance, they might seem adaptable. But to the Sigma, it's not flexibility. It's fear disguised as charm. She sees how these people adjust their personality like changing outfits. Their values bend depending on who's in the room. Their humor changes based on who's laughing. Even their body language molds to match the dominant energy. To others, it might look like they're just being socially smart, but to her it's unsettling. Because what's left when you've peeled away all those layers of approval seeking? Nothing solid, just echoes of whoever's around. Sigma females don't trust people who can't stay rooted in who they are. She knows this kind of behavior usually comes from deep insecurity, a fear of rejection so strong that authenticity feels like a risk. But to her, that's the biggest red flag of all. Because if someone keeps editing themselves in every room, they eventually forget what their original version even looked like. She doesn't hate them, but she keeps them at a distance, not out of cruelty, but protection. Because she knows that people who constantly shift can't be counted on. If you change your truth every time someone raises an eyebrow, you can't be trusted to stand for anything, especially not when it matters. And what really disturbs her isn't the act itself, it's the betrayal, not of her, but of their own soul. Every time someone abandons their voice, their truth, their quirks, just to be accepted, they're shrinking a little more inside. Sigma females feel that in the room. It's like a quiet, invisible collapse that no one else notices, but she does. Every time. So while others are busy being impressed by how well-liked someone is, she's already moved on. Because she doesn't care how many rooms someone can fit into. She cares if someone can stand still in their own skin, no matter who's watching. Number 7. They detect social predators before they strike. They detect social predators before they strike. While others are still charmed by the smooth talker, the fake humility, or the too perfect smile, the Sigma female is already 3 steps ahead, watching, analyzing, and registering every inconsistency. She doesn't need drama or loud red flags. She picks up on the quiet signals, the slight manipulations, the intentional flattery, the calculated vulnerability meant to disarm. She's not paranoid. She's experienced. And she's learned that the most dangerous people in any room aren't the ones who yell or brag. They're the ones who smile while studying you. The ones who offer help that feels like a leash. The ones who mirror your emotions too perfectly, gain your trust too fast, and collect personal details like currency. Most people miss it. They get swept up in the attention, the compliments, the carefully crafted image. But Sigma females feel when something's off. Their intuition doesn't shout, it hums. And when it starts humming, they don't ignore it. They go quiet. Still, detached. They don't play into the predator's game. They don't give them what they're fishing for: validation, information, access. Instead, they let the predator circle, thinking they've found easy prey, while she observes in ice-cold silence. It's not fear, it's calculation. She watches how they move from one person to another, how they test boundaries, how they create tiny imbalances to see who notices. She sees how they isolate, how they guilt-trip, how they subtly control the flow of conversation. These are things most people chalk up to strong personalities or natural charm. But she knows better, and when she sees it clearly, she doesn't warn anyone. She doesn't launch into hero mode. She just removes herself from the target zone. Quietly, completely, without fanfare. Because she knows calling out a social predator too soon often backfires. The charmers always have fans. But she's not here to convince anyone. She's here to protect her peace. Sigma females don't fear predators. They dismantle them silently, by never giving them the stage they crave. By being the one person who sees through the smile and chooses not to play. Number 8. They spot the ones who secretly envy them. They spot the ones who secretly envy them, and they don't need proof, just one look. Sigma females are hypersensitive to emotional undercurrents. While everyone else hears the words, she reads the tone, the eyes, the timing. So when someone says, "I could never pull that off, but it looks good on you," or "Wow, you're really lucky things just work out for you," she doesn't take it at face value. She catches the subtle bitterness baked into the compliment, the envy wrapped in politeness. It could be a smile that's just a second too tight, applause that feels reluctant, support that disappears the moment attention shifts to her. Sigma females feel the discomfort others try to hide when they're succeeding, glowing, or simply not needing approval. And because they're not attention seekers themselves, the envy they attract feels even more strange to them. They're not trying to outshine anyone, they're just being themselves. But that alone is often enough to trigger resentment in people who depend on external validation to feel worthy. The Sigma woman knows when someone is clapping for her with one hand while sharpening a knife with the other, and she never calls it out. She won't embarrass anyone, won't cause a scene, won't start drama. She'll keep the peace on the surface, smiling, nodding, maybe even thanking them. But inside, she's mentally closed the door. What most people don't realize is that Sigma females never forget subtle betrayal. Not because they hold grudges, but because they treat patterns seriously. One moment of fake support might not mean much to others, but to her, it's a crack in the foundation. If she sees it once, she watches more closely. If she sees it twice, she detaches. And no, she won't retaliate. She simply fades, stops sharing good news, stops inviting certain people into her wins. She understands that some people can only love you when you're beneath them, struggling or apologizing for your power. The moment you own your light unapologetically, their hidden envy bubbles to the surface. Sigma females don't fear envy. They just won't stay around to feed it. They'd rather walk alone than shrink to make someone else feel comfortable in their own skin. Number 9. They clock the nice people who weaponize kindness. They clock the nice people who weaponize kindness. Sigma females are not fooled by soft voices and sugary smiles. In fact, they're more suspicious of those who seem too sweet, too agreeable, and too eager to please. Because she knows that behind some of the most polished manners lies a dark skill, emotional manipulation, dressed in kindness. She sees the ones who never raise their voice but still manage to control every room they walk into, the ones who guilt trip without ever sounding harsh, who offer help that comes with invisible strings, who say things like, "I was just trying to be nice," after dropping a passive-aggressive jab so smooth that most people didn't even notice the cut. But the Sigma female notices. She hears the tone under the compliment. She catches the micro-insults hidden in polite suggestions. She sees how some people use kindness as currency, give just enough to make others feel indebted, then pull back when they don't get what they want. What makes these people dangerous is that most of the world praises them. They're seen as generous, selfless, the good ones. But the Sigma knows that real kindness doesn't manipulate, doesn't guilt, and doesn't use your gratitude as leverage. Real kindness is quiet and clean, but performed kindness? That's strategic. It's calculated to control how others perceive them and to get what they want without ever having to ask directly. These are the people who play the victim masterfully, who hurt others but do it with a smile so they look like the wounded one, who build emotional alliances by being nice, then weaponize them later as silent armies of guilt and obligation. And they always hide behind the same defense. But I've been so nice to you. Sigma females can't stomach that kind of manipulation. She doesn't attack or expose them. But once she sees the pattern, she emotionally checks out. She stops responding to the sweetness, stops reacting to the guilt, stops giving them the control they so politely demand. Because when you've lived long enough in truth, fake kindness feels like poison in perfume. And the Sigma female would rather be called cold than be controlled by a smile with hidden teeth. Number 10. They see who's pretending to be smart versus actually intelligent. They see who's pretending to be smart versus who's actually intelligent, and they see it with surgical clarity. Sigma females don't get impressed by big words, fancy quotes, or name-dropping famous thinkers. In fact, the more someone tries to prove they're intelligent, the more likely she is to start tuning them out. Because real intelligence doesn't need decoration. It shows up in clarity, not complexity. She spots intellectual cosplayers almost immediately, the ones who talk like walking TED Talks but can't hold a conversation without turning it into a performance. They throw around buzzwords, reference books they skimmed, and quote philosophers they don't actually understand. To everyone else they sound deep. To her they sound like they're doing everything but thinking for themselves. Sigma females pay attention to how people process, not just how they speak. She listens for original thought, not recycled opinions. She notices when someone answers a question by actually answering it, not redirecting it into a monologue. She values curiosity over certainty, insight over noise, because to her, intelligence isn't about being right, it's about being real. She also notices how the pretenders treat others. The ones faking brilliance often look down on those who don't speak their language. They act superior, use confusion as a flex, make others feel small to feel bigger. But truly intelligent people, they make complicated things simple. They explain, not inflate. And they welcome other viewpoints instead of feeling threatened by them. Sigma females don't challenge these cosplayers. She doesn't embarrass them or call them out, she just watches and files them under performance-based intellect. Because once she sees that someone's intelligence is all costume, no content, she stops trying to engage them on any deep level. To her, that kind of conversation is a waste of her time and mental energy. Real intelligence, in her world, isn't loud or showy. It's quiet, grounded, authentic. And when she finds it in someone else, it stands out like a lighthouse in a fog of overcompensation. Because while others are fooled by the noise, she's listening for substance, always. Number 11. They notice the energy parasites disguised as vulnerable. They notice the energy parasites disguised as vulnerable. Sigma females are deeply intuitive, and while they're not cold-hearted, they're extremely selective about who they open up to emotionally. That's because they've dealt with people who confuse vulnerability with emotional dumping. People who show up with their wounds on full display, not to heal, but to hook. These individuals present themselves as broken, misunderstood, or constantly struggling. At first, it seems genuine. They tell sad stories. They lean in hard on sympathy. They know how to make themselves look small and in need of rescuing. But Sigma females notice something's off. These people don't want support. They want a host. Someone to carry the weight of their unhealed chaos. Someone to pour into them endlessly while they give nothing back but more emotional debt. And the worst part, they often do it under the mask of openness. They'll say things like, "I'm just being real," or "I'm going through a lot right now," every single time you talk to them. But Sigma females notice the pattern: vulnerability with no accountability, crisis with no growth, apologies with no change. It's not healing, it's harvesting. They drain people's attention, energy, and empathy like it's a power source they're entitled to. Sigma females have deep compassion, but they also have sharp boundaries. Once they realize someone's only vulnerable when they need something, or when they want to control the emotional tone of the conversation, they disconnect fast. They don't give warnings. They don't explain themselves. They just cut the cord. Because they know this. Emotional parasites don't stop on their own. You have to walk away or get drained dry. She understands that real vulnerability is raw but balanced. It seeks connection, not control. It allows space for others to exist too. But when someone takes up all the air in the room and wraps it in the language of being open, she knows what it really is. Manipulation through pity. A tactic to make people feel guilty for pulling away, even when their presence has become heavy. So the Sigma female doesn't fall for it. She sees it, labels it, and leaves. Not because she lacks empathy, but because she protects it like gold. Number 12. They can tell who uses humor as a shield. They can tell who uses humor as a shield. The sarcastic ones, the constant jokers, the people who laugh at everything so they don't have to feel anything. Most people find them funny, even magnetic. But the Sigma female? She sees the pain behind the punchlines. She knows when someone's humor isn't lighthearted. It's loaded. It's hiding something. She notices how they never let silence sit. How every serious question gets flipped into a joke. How vulnerability is always met with deflection. To others, it looks like wit. To her, it looks like a person who's scared to be seen. Because real humor adds life to a moment, but shield humor blocks anything real from getting through. And she feels it, like a wall going up every time the room gets even slightly emotional. These are the people who make fun of themselves before anyone else can, who turn their pain into stand-up routines so it feels less heavy, who mask discomfort with quick comebacks and laughter. It's not annoying to her, it's heartbreaking, because she knows they probably had to become the funny one to survive something. Maybe no one took them seriously growing up. Maybe it was the only way to get attention or avoid conflict. But somewhere along the way, their humor became armor. And now they don't know how to take it off. Sigma females don't confront or expose them. She's not here to force anyone to open up. But she keeps her emotional guard up, too. Because relationships with people who constantly deflect can become emotionally one-sided. You share. They joke, you go deep, they skim the surface. Over time, it drains you. So she stops giving more than they're willing to meet. Not out of bitterness, but out of respect for her own emotional depth. She knows that real connection requires truth, even if it's messy. And when humor is used to avoid that truth, it stops being endearing and starts being tragic. It makes her sad, not because they're broken, but because they clearly have something real to say, and they've trained themselves not to say it. So while others laugh, she listens, and while others call it just their personality, she quietly wonders what it's really protecting. When a Sigma female walks into a room, she doesn't just see people, she reads them. She hears what's not said, feels what's beneath the surface, detects motives wrapped in charm and truths hiding behind smiles. While others are distracted by noise, trends, and appearances, she watches in silence and remembers everything. She doesn't do it to judge, she does it to protect her peace. Because her time, energy, and presence are not handed out freely, they're earned. And once she's seen who you truly are behind the mask, there's no unseeing it. She won't argue. She won't confront. She simply rewrites your role in her story and moves accordingly. To most, she's a mystery. To the emotionally shallow, she's too much. But to those who live in truth, depth, and authenticity, she's a rare force, a mirror, a revealer, a soul that sees with precision. So the next time you meet a woman who listens more than she speaks, who watches before she acts, who doesn't flinch at silence, know this. She's not just quiet. She's calculating the real from the performative. And chances are, she's already seen more of you than you've ever admitted to yourself. If this spoke to your soul, even just one line, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join a space where depth, truth, and unapologetic honesty aren't just welcome, they're the standard. Drop a comment below and tell us, which point exposed a truth you've always felt but never heard out loud? We read every word, and your voice matters here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been quietly observing the world just like you. Because trust me, Sigma energy is rare, but it's contagious in the best way. And if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you never miss when we drop the next brutally real breakdown. This isn't just a channel, it's a movement. Welcome to the inner circle.